So it's a pleasure today to be talking to Richard Harman. And Richard is the CEO of AGBIS. So AGBIS, AGBIS, AGBIS. Tell us about AGBIS.
Well, Helen, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to talk to you and make contact again. And secondly, thank you for spelling that out so clearly, literally spelling it out.
Yes.
So yes, AGBIS stands for the Association of Governing Bodies of Independent Schools. Now, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially we're there for the governors of schools, independent schools. So do you want me to just talk a little bit about what it is and what we do?
I think that would be really helpful because in actual fact, so many people in schools at whatever level just don't know about how governing bodies work, or they have this sense that governing bodies, there's some elite group somewhere, and they certainly don't know, or lots of people don't know, that there is a body of governing bodies.
Yes. So, well, the first thing to say is the school is actually the member, not the individual governor. So our members, we've got about 800, between 800 and 900 members across the UK and internationally. And it's the school that's the member of AGBIS. So essentially that means, you know, anybody, any senior manager or whatever in a school can contact us for advice on governance. But of course, the truth is that unless you're a head, possibly a deputy in a big school, but a head, you don't often attend governors' meetings. You may not be aware of what governors do. You may sort of see governors around there occasionally, but one of the things we want to do is make it a bit clearer what governors are there for and what they do and why they're important. Although it's right that they shouldn't be interfering in the management of a school. So perhaps not surprising that unless you're a head or a governor, you may not be totally aware of AGBIS. But AGBIS was formed out of a merger between the Governing Bodies Association and the Governing Bodies of Girls' Schools Association, which is an even longer acronym.
Yes.
Back in 2000 or something. Those were formed back in the sort of after the Second World War. So there's a history to it, and they merged together to form just one governing body, whether it was whatever sort of school it was, and it's grown since then to the size and scope it is now. So what do we exist for? Well, we're a charity as well as a members association, and we exist, it says in our articles, for the advancement of education and the promotion of good governance. And essentially that last part, I mean, the first part is implicit in everything we do, but the second part is the sort of bread and butter of what we do, if you like. Yes. Which is that we're there to promote and disseminate best practice in governance, to help people understand what it is and practice it even better, and to share it around, spread the love, if you like, yes, spread the wisdom of what it is. So we want to be and believe that we are the authoritative voice in independent schools on governance. I know there are other voices and other commercial organizations that look at these things, but we're the members organization. So I think we've got a lot of expertise. And then lastly, on this short answer, how we deliver that has three main elements, because that's the next question. How do we do it? Yeah. And the first one is through providing an advice line and training opportunities and helping schools review their governance and doing self-assessments of governance, and through newsletters and e-learning and all kinds of other ways. And nowadays, of course, mostly online, we are helping to train and helping governors who are volunteers and may not be experts in education to learn about how best to practice governance and what their duties are. So that's the first thing: advice, training, and reviews of governance, that sort of thing. Second thing is to just support schools in their quest to achieve the best quality and effectiveness of practice. And the third thing is to engage with, in the jargon, all stakeholders, all important stakeholders in promoting the principles of good governance. And that means for us working with organizations like the Independent Schools Council in London, or SCIS in Scotland, where you are, or WISC in Wales, and other associations of the heads associations and the bursars, and also the DFE and the ISI and inspectorates and so on, to help everybody to be on the same page about good governance. So that's really the three parts of our mission underneath our main vision, which I've outlined already.
And governance is really important. I mean, I'm a governor. I chair, as you know, the British School of Amsterdam, which is an AGBIS member, and it's not it's not something you just take for granted. It's not something where you just turn up to meetings, say a few things and go away. I mean, it's much deeper than that. And one of the things I've found is that the longer you are a governor, if you're really engaging with it, the more that that governance, you realize is actually a process. It's not a set of tick boxes. But this past year with governance has been a particularly challenging time. But
Yeah.
you've done a lot as an organization to help schools. I know that and be aware. But how would you say that, if you had to step back and say, yeah, I think the governance in schools is faring well or not so well, or what are the challenges around that? What would you say over this past year?
Well, I mean, it has been an extraordinary year. You know, we've run out of words like unprecedented and
Yes,
extraordinary, haven't we? So
yes.
we almost take them for granted, but it has been remarkable. And I think the answer is that schools that were in decent shape going into the pandemic, and that includes their governance, and very often the two go together, actually. Schools that
Yes.
have good governance are run well, and vice versa.
Mm,
Schools that were in good shape are coming through it strongly and will come out of it
mm,
stronger.
mhm.
And the converse, I'm afraid, is true as well, that those that had probably not got round to, shall we say, taking advantage of AGBIS's advice about governance and
Mm,
reforming things, and perhaps had not really focused on their strategy carefully enough, or not looked carefully enough at the cash flow, the business side
yeah.
of it, or whatever it is, then some of them have found it a real struggle. Now,
Mm,
we've had to very quickly pivot, in the language of the day,
mm,
to an online offer.
mm,
And I'm sure you've attended some of those,
mm,
Helen. And what
yeah.
we found is that moving from seminars where you have to come to London or Edinburgh or
Mm,
wherever it is
mm,
to a webinar platform where first of all we have to boil everything down to only an hour or an hour and
yes.
a half, and
Yes.
secondly you can access it from wherever you are in the world, and including recordings, so at any time
Mm,
you want. That's massively extended our reach. Now,
mm,
we already had a strategy in AGBIS that we'd agreed the year before, actually, of wanting to move to a more digital approach because of this,
mm,
upping
mm,
our game with our website and being able to reach more members. But what's happened is that the pandemic's come along, and that has had to happen at warp speed,
yes. Yes.
which has been extraordinary, but actually a fantastic opportunity for us to reach
Mm,
more people. And perhaps this interview is one example of that.
mm,
Now, governors have also in their individual schools had to adapt in that sort of way. So, for example, meeting by video conference, which
yes.
previously was perhaps done in a very small set of
Mhm,
examples, but
mm,
now
mhm.
has had to be the way of things.
Yes.
Um, uh, Being more nimble,
Mhm.
being more responsive without, let's say, without rising to the temptation of interfering with management, which is
Yes.
you've got to
Yes.
avoid.
The
All of
fine
those things,
balance.
it's a
Mm,
fine balance. So the
mm,
governing bodies that have got that right,
mm,
I think, have helped their schools come through strongly and have supported their senior leaders who've been doing a fantastic job really well. There are some where that has been less true.
mm, mhm. How do you, and you might not be able to answer this question actually, but it's a question that's coming to my head. How do you deal with people who, or with the schools where it becomes clear that the governance isn't brilliant, but in fact people don't know that? And it's quite possible that the head doesn't know that either, because the head, and why would the head necessarily have experience of good governance unless they've experienced this in other boards themselves, or
Yes,
they sit in other environments? Because that feels to me that's a little bit like, it's like Donald Rumsfeld's unknown
it,
unknowns, isn't it? Yeah.
it is.
How do you manage that?
Well, as you said, it's, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I think that it's a very difficult nut to crack. I mean, if that's simply the case, and they never um, uh, respond to us reaching out, if you like,
Mm,
or engage with AGBIS, that's one of the big
mm,
frustrations, where a
yes.
school might come to us and it's too late in the day. The problems have
Mm,
become endemic or too deep
mm,
seated. And I want to say things like, well, if only you'd called us a year ago or 2 years ago, we might have been able to. Now, obviously, I don't say that, but that might be what I
mm,
think.
mm,
And there are some examples of that, but I think that that's why it's so important that the reach is improved, and that's why we need to keep
mm,
pushing forward with
yes.
reaching the parts that other things can't reach, to use the old
Yes.
advert,
Yes.
because and that includes heads and bursars, by the way. So one of the important things there is we've been doing a lot of work in partnership with the heads associations. For example, we've got a 7-part HMC series going on at the moment on good governance, where we're jointly presenting with HMC, and you're getting the heads association and the governors association perspective in the same webinar over a series of 7. That's going to be certificated. Obviously, my dream is that every single HMC governor, school governor, will take part in that over time. And we're doing similar things with other associations. So we're trying to reach more broadly and more deeply that way. And I'm also trying to make sure that we have reciprocal arrangements with my colleagues in the other associations, so that I talk at their conferences, offer training to their new appointees about the importance of good governance and what AGBIS does, and vice versa. So I think it's sort of a multi-track approach, but you can't win them all, as you implied. But the resources, there's huge, rich resources there, actually.
Yes, yeah. You mentioned international schools as well, and just thinking for a moment about the independent sector, the UK independent sector, and its reputation internationally, because it does have a strong reputation internationally. Do you see that reflected in the governance, or is that too broad a question to ask?
I think it's a good question to ask. Do you mean, do I see it reflected in the governance of international schools?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's an interesting question, and actually it's one that's given us pause for thought in our strategic discussions as an association, because we would love to be able to reach more schools internationally. We do have a number, but I think we've got a lot to offer to them. On the other hand, the challenge is that governance in different jurisdictions means different things and looks very differently. So you might have a school like yours in the Netherlands, which is a British school, very much along the British model, and it follows all the sort of British criteria and expectations, including of good governance. So it's very much just happens to be in Amsterdam rather than in UK.
Yeah,
but
albeit that there is a slightly different board structure as well in the Netherlands, which is expected with a 2-tier structure of management board and supervisory board. But you're right. You know, it is very similar in many ways.
Well, there will be that mapping on of whatever the local jurisdiction or the national jurisdiction is as well. And of course, in some jurisdictions, that is quite different. And I won't name any countries, but there are a number of schools operating now, which may be franchise schools or British model, may in some ways look and feel very much like a British operated school. But if you look at the governance structure, it's actually dominated by either the government of that country, or a few very wealthy individuals, essentially owners. So it's much more proprietorial, really.
Yes.
They don't have the same charity structure, of course, that we do. They're not charity trustees. So it isn't a one size fits all. And it's, I mean, it's two-sided coin, because my view would be that some of those schools need good governance advice even more, because they don't have those regulatory structures above them, which help them to keep on the straight and narrow, let's put it that way, and help them to understand not to interfere in management and the curriculum and everything. But on the other hand, you've got to respect the individual jurisdictions that they're in. But I think it's something not to be gone into lightly, wantonly, or unadvisedly, as they say. And so we are sort of looking at how we can help international schools or international British style schools of different kinds with improving their governance structures, whatever they are. But it isn't a simple formula.
Well, you and I can talk offline as well about the Better Boards course, which we've been working on with Matthew Savage about international schools and governance with a heart. But returning to this interview, are you optimistic about the state of independent school education in the UK?
I am, and I always have been, because for the simple reason that it has thrived and survived through all kinds of challenges, political, economic, and otherwise, and social, over the past decades, and centuries. But if you think of some of the challenges, even in the last 50 years, it's remarkable. It's gone up and down. It's, you know, had its fortunes go up and down, but it has, the sector is very diverse. So you can't just talk about it as one monolithic thing. And in that diversity is great strength and great nimbleness. And you will always have some who don't succeed, but you will also always have others who do and who grow. And what we're seeing is at the moment a consolidation in the sector with increasing chains and groups of schools. It's perhaps tougher for the smaller standalone schools who have a smaller turnover, more vulnerable in some circumstances. So there will be changes and it won't be easy, but I'm optimistic. And the main reason I'm optimistic is that in spite of a lot of the pressures, some of them justified, some of them not, you know, from the social side and from the economic and political side, that our schools have done incredibly well by and large through this last 12 months and responded very fast and very effectively, for example, to the need to move to online learning and effective online learning, not just offering something remotely, but offering something which works remotely. Now, in it, again, like everything, that causes a bit of a challenge for us politically, because, you know, I suspect one of the big political agenda items coming out of this is going to be the advantage gap and how to help those children who've fallen and families who've fallen behind with learning. Will they ever catch up? How can we help them catch up? Who can help them catch up, etc. And, you know, having schools having done well in this respect is a good thing, but it might also be seen as a politically a challenging thing. But nevertheless, I think if we navigate that right and humbly, it should be a strength coming out. And I do know of some schools which have been thinking, you know, we might be losing numbers coming out of the pandemic, but they're actually now thinking they're going to gain numbers because parents who can afford it have seen what they can offer. Affordability, of course, is another big issue. So I think that is going to remain very significant. How do schools make themselves sufficiently affordable and open and accessible to a sufficient proportion of children? But you know, there are many challenges, but I am optimistic overall.
And I mean, you and I have led in some amazing schools over the years, and the challenges were challenges then, but it seems to me that the challenges now are even more acute in so many ways. I am full of admiration for people leading schools now. I'm full of admiration.
I don't know about you, but the number of times I've thought over the last 12 months, do you know what? I'm so glad I retired when I did. I know I shouldn't say that, but you know, having said that, I think if you're the sort of person who thrives on that adrenaline, then, you know, it may have been an exciting thing, but there's only so long you can go on with that. And I think we've got some really exhausted people at all levels in schools. And I think that is one thing that governors need to be aware of. And I've actually just done a piece for this very magazine about leading with empathy. And I think governors need empathy more than ever before. They need still to be robust and you know, challenging, but they need to be empathetic, particularly to their senior leaders who have taken the brunt of this. It's been they've been heroic, and they will continue to be as we go back to school. But they need a break as well.
They certainly do. So final question, if you could look 5 years into, if you had a crystal ball and you could look 5 years into the future, what would you like to see in terms of education in the mists of that crystal ball?
I would like to see a more joined up educational system in the UK. I mean, I think, as I said before, it's a good thing that it's diverse, probably the most diverse types of education anywhere in the world, actually. I can't think of any other country in the world that has a greater variety of styles of schools in it, which is a strength, as I've already said. But I think it's not always as joined up as it should be. And that means not only within sectors, but between sectors as well. And I'd like to see real engagement from government and the sector about joining up the whole piece to the benefit of all children. Now that may be
Yes.
pie in the sky, but I think there are real things that can be done there to improve that. As far as the independent sector is concerned in itself, I would like to see a more affordable offer, however that's delivered, whether that's through headline fees or a deeper and broader bursary type, means tested bursary type offer, or whatever. Again, that may be idealistic, but I think it's important because we can't keep pricing ourselves out.
No.
Having said that, I would like to, the third and last point, which may sound contradictory to the last one, is I'd like to see the continued emphasis on excellence, because I think what we do is we provide an example of what excellent looks like.
Yes.
When you have got the resources. And I do think there need to be more resources going into the state sector, by the way. Fully on board with that. But
into education, full stop.
Correct, all the way through. But I think, and I'd like to see that as a real priority going forward for the society. But our job is to promote excellence in its positive form as a reason for investing in education. In other words, we're saying, look, if you invest properly, and you give people autonomy, this is the sort of thing you can achieve with proper accountability. That's really it.
Yes. Well, I like that vision. I like it a lot. So, yes, yeah. Well, look, Richard, thank you so much. Thank you. It's been really lovely to speak with you.
As always, a pleasure. And thank you very much, Helen, and all the best. Thank you.